All right, welcome everyone to the Mission to Millions Idea Accelerator series. This is part 2, class 2, and I'm your host, Elizabeth Frisch, and author of Mission to Millions, Taking Your Big Ideas and Making Them Reality. I am super excited to be with you all tonight. This front part of the course is some of my favorite material to teach. It's the material where my students and my clients have had the biggest breakthroughs. And it's great that we're doing it for the holidays because a lot of the things we're going to cover in the course today will help you clear baggage around holiday stuff too. So if you're going into a trip or something fun, this will come in use. So just a few logistical instructions. This is being recorded. If you're having any audio issues, you can switch from microphone on your computer to telephone. The telephone feed is always crystal clear. Your microphone feed is dependent on your internet speed at your home. Any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. You can also raise your hands and we can unmute you to ask a question. We do allow webcams on the webinar. I will actually have mine off tonight. But if you want to turn on your webcam and say hello to everyone, feel free to do so. And then just, we've got Deanna Kelzer on the phone. Live support is available for ongoing issues. So if you just want to message Deanna correctly, if you're having any issues, you can go in your chat box. You can pick Deanna's name off and get going with her, and she can help you directly resolve your issues. So just a quick review, because I know some of you jumped right into class 2 and hadn't listened to class 1 yet. Please go back and do so. There was homework and actions. But just, the first 3 classes that we're doing are to remove baggage and recharge your batteries, and to really get you guys in the practice of capturing ideas and taking action on them. So these first 3 courses are all about clearing the space and opening your mind so that you're ready for part 2. Part 2 is practical, nuts and bolts. I'm going to give you a lot of tools to really nail it, share your idea, build teams, build support, ask for money, get your husband to take you on a hot date, whatever it is that you have in your idea. That part 2 is going to be all about making that happen. Then the other thing I did say is we are going to have special bonuses. So next week is actually going to be one of our quote-unquote bonus classes, in that a lot of the content I'm going to cover next week is actually from book 2. So this week we're going to work a lot on removing your baggage, and I'm actually going to give you a preview and practices from my book 2 that I'm writing that are actually going to help you permanently clear them. And so I'm going to give you things that you can practice on a daily basis, a weekly basis, and hopefully a lifetime basis to make sure that all these things that we're going to talk about tonight and help you clear out, that you can take forward for your entire life and say goodbye. So just a quick review of last week to remind you all, one of the questions I started with was, why does the same idea succeed in one organization and fail in another? Why is it that you can take the same idea to a dozen different places and how the idea will come out could be 12 different ways? And we talked about the fact that you can't engineer humans. And so one of the principles and why I teach the book and get putting your idea in place as practices is because practices are adaptable to the situation, the circumstance, and the humanity that's going to surround you personally, whatever it is your idea that you're bringing forward. And so last week, we really focused on what is the power behind making an idea happen. And one of the things they've shown, and Aristotle said it best, is the energy of the mind is the essence of life. And one of the strongest energies of the mind is thinking of an idea and wanting to create. We're creation beings at our core. And so our goal from last week's class was to get you guys out of what I call a survival mentality and move you into a thrival mentality so your ideas can grow and flourish. Now, I had a great question from someone in the class this week, and we actually had a long phone conversation on this question, and so I thought I'd share it with the rest of the class because I always figure if one student asks me, another one may have the exact same question. And so if you remember when we talked about survival versus thrival, I said survivals are based on fear and self-preservation. It's a very tight, closed space. It's hard to move. It feels constricting, panic, that kind of thing. Not a lot of action there. And thrival is based on possibility and growth. But the question that came up is, okay, great. So how do I shift from one to the other? And the reality is, too, and the part two, the question was, can I be in survival in some places and thrival in other in my life? Absolutely, 100% yes. And so I have a 3-step process that I tell people to do when you realize where you are, and especially if that where you are is survival. And so number one, the cool thing is the minute you recognize that you're working out of a fear or a self-preservation or a let's just make it to the next hour, minute, week, or through the next year, you're in survival. And so like any other thing, the minute you recognize you're in it, then you can actually take action on it. And so step 2 that I told her was that you have to do something that's called reframing. And when I say reframing, what I mean is taking what you're doing and seeing why the current context you're thinking about isn't going to work. So let me give you an example. In that, let's say you're in a situation at your office and you have a terrible boss, and all you're doing is trying to survive each day of work and come out with your job intact, okay? So step 1, you recognize like, wow, I am just literally getting up in the morning, trying to get through the day and coming home. How do I reframe that? Reframing would be looking at saying, wow, what is my long-term goal for my career or my life or how my days go or even what I want from my relationship with my boss, and saying, okay, I get I'm surviving, but what do I want? And so maybe something you want is better communication with your boss, because maybe your boss is beating you up for not communicating enough. So once you have a reframe, it's like, oh, my goal is actually communication. Then you can actually say, okay, what is something I could do that would enhance the communication so instead of my boss pouncing on me all the time, I'm actually being proactive. And so you might be, oh, I'm going to set up a weekly meeting with this boss, have a briefing, tell them what's going on so that instead of waiting for them to come in my office and pounce on me, I'm proactively communicating forward. Now, one of the things that's important about take action, because it immediately shifts you into thrival space, is action doesn't have to be big. 5 minutes alone will literally pull your mind out of survival to thrival. And so really, really great question, because it takes very little action on your part to actually shift from survival to thrival thinking. Another thing could be you decide you actually don't want that job anymore, so an action you can take is you start looking for another job. But again, once again, then you are shifting out of just surviving and actually looking for growth and possibility in your future. So great question. Thank you so much for asking it to me and taking the time to be on the phone with me to get the answer this week. The other thing we covered last week is I told you that culturally, and unfortunately culturally around the world, we are taught the idea stagnation model. We don't live in societies that tend to promote or support, with a few exceptions, our ideas making it out of our heads and into the world. And so what we're going to do with this course, and the first step we took last week was around the anchoring part of idea growth. And so as we go through this 6 weeks, I'm going to be taking you through the steps of idea growth. And so we taught the anchor practice last week, and I was so pleased to get so much from so many of you. I had people send me their ideas. I loved it. I can't even believe some of the things you guys are up to. I mean, from starting a business to reconciling a long-term relationship to there is someone who is literally going to transform their entire community through a community project. I mean, you guys are up to big things. And so we taught the anchoring process last week, which I said, have a goals or an idea journal, write it down, read it, look for limiting words, read it for energy, declare it, post it, and keep sharing it. And so those of you who did share your ideas with me, I so appreciated that. And I have a little reminder to throw in, which is all of you, 15 minutes with me on the phone to talk about the one idea you really want to make happen next year would be really critical for you all. And it's my gift to you. I offer it, and I promise it will be a great call. So don't forget to reach out to Deanna at m2m@thrivalcompany.com and get that scheduled. And then we talked about the power of action. You will hear me repeat this through every single call. 5 minutes of action, no matter how small, can move you. 5 minutes of action, no matter how small, can make a huge idea happen. So don't get stopped, take an action. And then we did talk about your bonus practice, which was gratitude. And it was really great because a couple of you emailed me and said, wow, I had a really great week because I just stopped and appreciated all the amazing things that were happening in my life. In fact, for me, I had a great blog post. One of the charities I work for interviewed me for a little post called Confessions of a Compulsive Giver. And I got to share, one of my favorite phrases is, most people say every rose has its thorn. And I love the flip side, which is I'm thankful that in my life, every thorn has a rose. And so gratitude can really keep you moving and energized through that idea. So last but not least, why practices? I just did an interview for a global summit that's happening, and one of the questions they asked me was, why did I focus so heavily on practices? And what was interesting is I said, well, because I tried teaching theory and no one did anything. And so what I can tell you is if you take each of these practices that I'm giving you, you will see, and Keith Cunningham's, hero of mine, really brilliant guy, his phrase is, ordinary things done consistently produce the extraordinary. So your mastery is in practicing. So doing the repetition, making it get into your DNA, that's where it is. It doesn't require brilliance necessarily. It doesn't require a complete upset of your life, but it does require a commitment to play with each practice and build your muscle with it. Okay, so tonight is the night that we get to do some baggage burning. And the reason why is most people who come to me and hire my company to work with them, I will tell you the reason why they're hiring me is because they've allowed their personal baggage, corporate baggage, organizational baggage, team baggage, you name the baggage, kill the idea, and that's why it can't go anywhere and happen. And so when I can take them through this exercise, which I'm going to take you through tonight, they can powerfully shift and all of a sudden the gates open and you can move forward. Because the reality is we all have baggage. There is not one person on this earth that doesn't have baggage. And as I mentioned last week, some of us carry a couple bags around. Some of us have, enough that we need someone else to help us carry our baggage around. And some of us have storage compartments with baggage in it. The good news is the 7 views I'm going to teach you tonight about that will stop your ideas, will clear a ton of this baggage out for you. And the reason why I do this is because if you don't know your baggage, it owns you. And I actually put up here your money baggage because I will tell you some of the largest baggage we carry is around money. All right, so let the burn. Breaking through your mental barriers. So what we're going to do tonight is focus on identifying them so you can have power over them and take action in the face of them. So let's talk first about a practice that is near and dear to my heart. And the reason why was when I actually got and internalized this practice, I had a complete revolution in my life. And Peter Drucker is, of course, another one of my heroes. I'm 20-some years old in the business, and he was one of the first teachers out there. And I loved when he said, unless commitment is made, there are only promises and hopes, but no plans. So let's first talk about the pesky things that some of us call views, some call perceptions, some say our beliefs, some say they're our thoughts. So I remember my second job out of college, literally getting my performance review from my boss in my office. I still remember I was sitting there, and I remember he handed me this sheet of paper, and I literally had, on a scale of 1 to 5, all 5s, except for the very last thing, which was attendance at work. I had a 1. And he literally said, "Congratulations, Elizabeth, you did great everywhere except show up at work." And I remembered at the time sitting at my desk looking at him going, how could I possibly excel in the other 15 categories and you give me a 1 for being at work? I wasn't at work because I was out traveling. I was a consultant. They were putting me on the road and all this kind of stuff. And it was funny because he said something to me at the time and I totally refused to hear it, but he said, the perception is you aren't here. And people wonder what you're doing or if you're even doing any of your work. So that was very interesting to me. At the time I was young, I was in my 20s. I would love to say that I had a great breakthrough at that moment. But what instead I had a realization around my big apologies, everyone. We seem to be having a connection on the landline that keeps going bad. So thank you for your patience. Give me just 10 more seconds here, and I'm hoping we will get a resolution of this problem. Hold on, please. All right, everyone. I'm just going to do a quick 1, 2, 3. Can you give me a thumbs up and a sound check, please, and make sure you can hear me clearly? Thanks, everyone, for doing that. And again, apologize. Not sure why we had a feed issue, but all right. It sounds like everyone is able to hear me. So I think we are in business again. So back to my story with my supervisor. I ended up getting the view that I was not appreciated, and eventually I actually looked for another job and actually quit that position and moved on. Now, could I have done something else besides quit? The reality is, once you form a view or a perception on something, then suddenly you have defined your outcomes. And so the minute I decided I wasn't appreciated at my job, I went ahead and decided that I had to find another one. So what I actually ended up doing is something called the cycle of self-fulfilling prophecy. We all live in this paradigm. So what does this mean? It means that whatever we think drives our actions, and our actions drives our outcomes or our results. And then our outcomes or our results reinforce the view that we already had because we only could take actions within that view, faulty or good, which drives more outcomes, and that's how people get very entrenched in a viewpoint. It's a very powerful paradigm, and we all use it on a daily basis. So if you remember, I showed you those beautiful different colored glasses. We all have colored glasses, and that's called our own cycle of self-fulfilling prophecy. So what I want to give you tonight is a different way to look and be around this. And so there's a different model you all can adopt. That model is what I call the commitment model. And to actually help you see what the difference in the two models is, I'm going to share a very personal story. it's interesting, for many years, I wouldn't even share this story. And the reason is I felt so vulnerable, especially because I was a consultant and I was supposed to have this hot career and, have it all together and know all the answers and doing work for high profile clients. I felt like if I shared any of this, that they wouldn't hire me. I mean, it was just a huge fear for me. But the reality was, back in 2002, I started having serious health problems, and part of it had to do with the fact that I worked, horrible hours. I didn't take care of my body. My job owned me, and I gave birth to my first child, William, who's shown in this picture now, and everything went to pieces. Very quickly, I got diagnoses that I had 2 autoimmune diseases and a failing thyroid, and then they started telling me he had issues, and I had all this stuff going on, and I really, at the time, I remember just thinking, like, well, they told me my body's shot, I'm going to be crippled by the time I'm in my mid-40s, all this kind of stuff. And I just said, well, fine. I'm just going to keep working as hard as I work and focusing on my career, and that's just it. I accepted what they said as truth. And honestly, once they told me this whole story of why I was 140 pounds overweight by the time all the diagnoses rolled in, and they basically told me that was going to be the rest of my life because I had this thyroid issue and this autoimmune disease. And one day, a few years after my son was born, I was at the park with him, and still 140 pounds overweight, would love to say I was thinner, and he ran away from me. And he ran directly out in front of a car that was going. And I tried to chase him, and I was too fat to catch him. And I remember at that time literally looking at the car and thinking, oh my God, I am too fat to catch my child and save his life. And thank God that day that driver stopped, so he didn't get hit. But I will tell you, from that moment, I remember walking home with him in the stroller and thinking to myself, I will never, ever be that helpless again. That I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know where I was going to do it, but that I would be able to run faster than my son. That was never going to happen to me again. And so I actually made a phone call and hired a personal trainer. And at the time I had just launched, I was just in a big growth phase in my business, and I'd already taken on debt. So I literally took out a home equity loan to the tune of $11,000 to pay this trainer, non-refundable, in advance for a year, to come to my house, watch the food I ate, and just basically babysit me. And I remember when I hired her, I told her, I said, look, I can't lose weight. I got these 2 autoimmune diseases. I got this failing thyroid, blah, 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 blah. But I just want to be able to run faster than my son. So whatever you can do around getting me so that I can run faster than my son, I'm cool with. So obviously, fast forward to now, I am not 140 pounds overweight. A lot of you know me in person. A lot of you see me in pictures. I've lost well over 100 pounds. And I don't have 2 autoimmune diseases anymore. I actually put both into remission. They're non-detectable in my system, and I have a fully functioning thyroid. But what shifted? So my view still was that I couldn't lose weight. I mean, heck, all I wanted to do was run faster than my son. I didn't even bring the weight into it because I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do there. What shifted, though, was my commitment to my idea. And so even though I had this huge pile of views that some I'd given myself and some others had given me, I committed non-negotiably to run faster than my son. And so suddenly all my outcomes were driven by the commitment. Didn't matter all those little voices in my head and all the things the doctor told me and looking in the mirror and seeing what a wreck everything was. I was committed. And so one of the things you all have to realize and master is what we call the cycle of open possibility. And the reason why commitment to an idea that becomes goals, that become actions, is your perceptions and views lose their power. You take action no matter what you think or feel. you act in alignment with your commitments, not your feelings or your views. And so you break that cycle of self-fulfilling prophecy and actually create one of open possibility, because you stand in the commitment versus your view around something. And so I really that day realized that power, and it was a blessing. I even shifted my entire consulting practice when I distinguished this for myself on how I consulted with my clients, because I thought, oh my God, I was in this. They're all in this, and created all coursework and all sorts of stuff out of this one revelation on the power of commitment. So how does that help us with baggage? Let's hang tight. So in the book, in practice number 4, for those of you who've looked at the book, there's a practice called Identify Your Baggage. And I love Steven Pinker because he says, why every time we talk about the mind, why do we have to talk about, our emotional baggage? And the truth of the matter is we have to talk about it, A, because it's there, and B, because it stops us. It keeps us from moving forward. And so some people asked me one day at one of my classes what's the easiest way to find your baggage? And I actually put a paragraph in the book, which I added to the slide here for you all, which is where you find your baggage is when you notice that your actions are incongruent with the magnitude of what someone's asking you to do. So one of the things I always found amusing and was able to shift was that I was great at raising money for my business and for my companies I worked for and all that kind of stuff, getting funding, getting funded, all that kind of stuff. Whether it was other companies or my own, did great on that. But I had this huge mental block about asking even my best friend for money for my favorite charity. And so because I did this work, as soon as that started coming up, I remember looking and going, I've got some baggage. And in fact, my original iteration of Mission to Millions was many, many years ago. I used it to help people who are having trouble fundraising in nonprofits become successful fundraisers. That was like Gen 1 of this whole identify your baggage idea. So what I'd like to do right now is I'd like you all to just take out a piece of paper and a pen. And if you don't have one, then just close your eyes and think about it. But I'm going to give you just a minute because I want you to think about your very first memory you ever had about money. And for most people, your first memory about money comes somewhere between the ages of 4 and 7 or 8. So just take a moment. I'm going to play a little mood music, and I want you to think about your first memory of money, and then I'm going to show you how to take this and use it to get to your baggage around your idea. All right, everybody. So what I'd like you to do in the chat box is just type for me just a few of your first memories around money. So you can type me 10 sentences, you can type me a few words. While you're doing that, I'll share my first memory of money, which was, it was something that was very scarce in my life. And so my first memories were around that there wasn't enough of it, and that, my parents worked very, very hard to get it. My dad worked hours and hours and hours, but there still always seemed to be a shortage, and it seemed very hard to get it. It was like this big thing that you had to put a lot of effort into. And part of that, a lot of people, and I see some people on there have had the same experiences. Those of us who grew up in homes where, we weren't independently wealthy or those kind of things, there was definitely shortages and sacrifices and things like that, and fights and arguments and other things. Some people, when they think about money, think of it as a way to get something. It was like a freedom. It was the ability to buy something, and I love that someone just said that it was used to buy sweets. Some people, money meant like it was almost enslavement for our parents. Someone actually just mentioned that their dad died at his desk. And, loans, like money creates obligation. If you borrow some money from someone, it has to be paid back. So what I'm trying to illustrate by having you all get in contact with your first memories of money is, whatever your view is that you hold about money, whether it's something to be given away, whether it's something that's scarce, whether it's something you have to work really hard for, that's driving all your conversations in your life and some of those views you've developed from childhood. So no surprise in my home, I grew up with the view that you have to work really hard to get a lot of money, and that was just the path to it. In fact, I did have an uncle who was very wealthy, and my parents used to tell me that he never saw his family and he worked 24 hours a day. I actually found out later in my life that totally was not true, but that was what I was told. And so my view was I had to work really hard to get money. So in my career, no surprises, I worked overtime. I worked constantly looking for more work. Obviously, I already told you my story. I had, my income was based on the hours I worked. I was exhausted, I was stressed, health degraded, missed my family, didn't feel connected, suffered from burnout. Lots of things that happened because of that money baggage. So now let's take the bigger picture. So just so you know, I want you to hold on to that money exercise. I promise you we all have money baggage that we have to clear, and you can use this to clear that. But where we're going to focus tonight is the 7 views that you have to some extreme or another. Some of you may have 2, some of you may have 5, some of you may have all 7. But there are 7 things that go on in your mind almost more quickly than you can consciously, and many times actually more quickly than you can consciously realize. You have 7 things. And how I came up with this list of 7 was literally after working with thousands of people over a 10-year period. I started keeping track of when I would go meet with them or whatever, what were those views. And so there was a top 7, and here they are. View number 1 that will sink your idea is a lot of us have this view that we don't really deserve that idea to happen or that great thing to happen to us, that there's something about us that is undeserving of the success or the goal or things like that. And what happens if you have that view is you won't ask for enough, you may make token asks around your idea, you may ask half-heartedly. And let's take again the money example. You won't have funding or you'll have little funding, and you'll prove your view that you, your idea, your team, your group don't deserve it. View number 2 is what I call the honest Abe view, in that you have to accomplish all this stuff first in order to earn it. And so in order for your idea to happen, you literally have something that goes on in the back of the mind that says you have to earn it. Well, here's the reality around ideas. Many ideas we come up with, we have no basis to prove we can do it. We may not have any funds to say we can do it. We may not have backing. We may not have support. We may not have anything except literally it coming out of our mouths. And if you wait until you think you've hit some magic line to earn it, to move your idea forward, you may never make that idea happen. So if you're stuck with your idea thinking that you have to earn someone's trust, or you have to build a reputation, or you have to have enough money, you're going to find that you keep trying to perfect things. So you may share, but minimally. You may ask, but minimally. You'll find yourself saying things like, I'm not quite ready yet. There's a lot of waiting involved in this view. So if you see yourself stuck in that wait, okay, know that you're struggling with the I have to earn it view. And of course, the outcome or the result is slow or no progression of the idea, support, funding, whatever it is you're trying to do around your idea. Here's one that I learned just brilliantly through charity work. And if all of you have not picked a charity to volunteer with, I tell you, it's probably one of the most rewarding things you will do in your life to learn about yourself. View number 3 is you already know what they will say to you about your idea. So what does that mean when I say you already know what they will say? So you may intentionally not talk to someone about your idea just because you know they're going to diss it or say something negative about it, or you assume they're going to say no, that kind of thing. You actually play the prophet, is what I call it. And this can really, really hold you back. One of the greatest examples I had was when my husband wanted to launch a new charity called One House at a Time. He had a friend who, in a million years, I would never have thought he had a sum of money to give that was large. And it was just because, he's a humble man, employee of the state, all that kind of stuff. And so I pretty much in my mind already decided that he didn't have the money to donate. My husband, on the other hand, went and had a conversation with him about the project and just shared about it. And he wrote a $1,000 check. And he paid. That was the first home we were able to do on that project. And I remember that day realizing, I played the prophet. I actually told myself he didn't have it. And look at, my husband didn't play the prophet. He just shared. And now we have our first home done. And my husband was brilliant throughout his thing doing this. He's now 47 homes later, mastered not listening to his little voice about playing the prophet. The other thing to realize about your idea, and it's a great statistic to remember, is that 70% of us donate our money to charities or ideas or causes or even groups, organizations that aren't charities, right? But only 30% of us have the money to do it. So if people want to see your idea happen, they won't just give out of their excess. They'll give up something to fund a great idea. So keep that in mind. This is a good one. I can't look bad. So I always joke that even people who say they don't care if they look bad actually care that people think they don't care about looking bad. Like, everybody's got something around, I can't look bad. So you can fill in the blank on this view, but if you have anything going on around, I'm going to look bad, stupid, or whatever, you're going to not ask, or you're going to not ask till you think you have it perfect. And the result of this is going to be paralysis around your idea. Because this one literally freezes us in our tracks. It's when we walk into the room and we see that person we want to talk to, and we turn around and walk away from them because we think, they'll think I'm stupid, I may look bad, That's that view. This one is really, really important, and so important, I'm going to give you some pointers on it. What is your view of no? So I'm going to give you just a few of them. Some people, when they're told no, immediately go into I failed. Some people, when they're told no, think, I stink. They told me no. I must really suck at this, right? Some people, when they're told no, automatically go, I'm bad. I did something wrong. I have to go fix it. Other people take it really personal. You feel like people don't like you, or they don't like your idea or project. Other people, like me, I'm an engineer. I often do this when people tell me no, is I think, there's something wrong with what I asked, or there's something wrong with the idea, and I go into what I call my little fixer mode. And then, of course, there's the one we're all afraid of, is that they said no because they actually think we're incompetent or we can't handle it or we're not the one to make that idea happen. Another one, they don't believe we can do it or I can do it or you can do it. There's that disbelief factor. And some of us, when we get told no once, we automatically assume everyone will tell us no. And one of the fascinating things to me, like I said, generation one of Mission to Millions was actually years and years and years ago when I just used to work in some fundraising training. What I told fundraisers, even the best fundraisers, their average is they get a yes 3 times out of every 10 asks. So when it comes to your idea and you're sharing it, if you stop at the first no, the second no, the third no, the fourth no, the fifth no, the sixth no, or the seventh no, you're missing the yes on number 8. And so it's important to recognize that. We all don't like to look like a fool. We don't want others to think we look like a fool. But at the end of the day, what we're worried about is telling me no means something. And so we stop asking and sharing about our idea. This one you have to have the biggest shift around, because this one, your view of no, can determine whether your idea goes or it dies. So I would like to put in your head what I call an alternate view of no. And we talked about rose-colored glasses in the last class, and so I'm sharing that again here, which is you may have really black glasses right now around no. Me, I always joke that my mom told me I came out of the womb with no as the start of negotiations. And it was true. I literally, when people would say no, I would definitely take it and be like, oh, it's just no to how I asked that. And then I'd go back and I'd refigure it and then I'd come back with it. And my sister and brother used to joke I got away with murder. But I would just look at them and say, well, I just didn't take no. I would negotiate till I got to a yes. But one of the most powerful shifts I had was actually a precept taught to me by Dr. Barry Morgulin. He works with an organization called Morgulin Energy Institute. And he said the most powerful way to look at feedback, whether positive or negative, whether they say yes or no, is the whole purpose of that feedback is to deepen your relationship with the person giving you feedback. Now, I have adopted this practice into my life, and it's been life-changing. Because think about it, every time someone tells you no, if the first thing in your mind is, I've just been given a gift to deepen my relationship with this person, that takes all the negative energy charge out of a no. So what does that look like in practice? Well, one is that no is the start of negotiations. So if it's an opportunity to deepen the relationship, that you can continue the conversation. No doesn't mean you walk out the door. No doesn't mean you can't talk about it ever again to them. You know, I have some people, especially I have one client, some of my ideas I pitch to them take anywhere from 3 to 5 years for them to tell me yes. So if I was stopped by 1 or 2 no's, I'd never have them as a client. No is an opportunity to build relationships. So when people tell me no, sometimes I get very inquisitive and curious and think like, wow, so that was a no for you. So what came up? What do you think? You know, and like all of a sudden I get in this really great conversation with someone. No can be, thank you so much. And because it's a no for you and because this is amazing feedback because I want to make this happen, talk to me more about it. I really want to understand it deeply because what you're thinking, saying, or feeling is something someone else may be having. Another thing to say when people tell you no is, I get it's a no for you. Who else do you think I should go talk to? Who else do you think could make this happen if not you? Another thing you can do with a no is, got it that it's a no, and I would still love to stay connected with you, XYZ fashion. You know, are you willing to XYZ, fill in the blank? Another one, and I use this a lot in the business environment, is sometimes your biggest resistors and your biggest no's are willing to give you their expertise. They have an expertise, and their no has to do with maybe you're not fulfilling what in their mind they think you need to do. And so oftentimes I'll get a no, and I'll ask them to volunteer some expertise for me. And the list goes on and on and on. But the minute no or yes or whatever feedback comes to you is looked at as an opportunity to deepen a relationship, negative charge off that view. So, we as human beings don't like to be uncomfortable. And especially when we have an idea, a lot of the times that we try to get people to do the idea, it's because we feel like we will make them uncomfortable. So we don't share, or we don't push them, or we don't ask the right question, or we stutter, or we go around, and we just, in general, aren't very direct. So one of the questions I want you to ask yourself is being uncomfortable a showstopper for you? So I just want you to think about that for a minute. Any time in your life, and it doesn't have to be around your idea, that you're put in an uncomfortable situation, what's your instinctual response? You know, some people retreat. Some people freeze. Some people charge head first. Some people, get argumentative when they get uncomfortable. Just think about that. But what I want you to have that thought is, think about your life. Is there anywhere in your life that you do to improve yourself, get to a goal, develop a new skill, be healthy, start a new relationship that doesn't feel uncomfortable at some point? So this view, it holds an incredible amount of power over us. But what I want you to see is that not only is it not bad to be uncomfortable, what would be possible if we never felt uncomfortable? I always think of the movie Wall-E, when the humans left the earth and they're all gigantic and just sitting at computers and they don't even move anymore because they decided they weren't going to be uncomfortable anymore. They were just going to sit there and eat and press buttons. They weren't going to push themselves anymore. They weren't going to try to solve solutions. So realize that this view can really, really stop you. And especially if you're worried about making others uncomfortable, you won't ask, you'll sugarcoat the message, you'll worry excessively about what they're thinking. And I'm actually going to teach you a practice next week called Worry to Action, because I'm going to free you up from that worry thing. And then we find ourselves stuttering and justifying and unfocused and unclear. And it's funny, when I go to pitch meetings sometimes with my clients, they literally can't even verbalize what they want to ask because I can tell they're so uncomfortable making the other person uncomfortable. So again, slow to no idea progression, support, or funding with this view. Now, I don't care who you are or how many psychological compensations you have. Everybody has a failure baggage they carry. Some of us have great compensations for it, but failure is definitely tough for us. It's not okay to fail. It's not okay to waste their time, talents, or money. It has to be a sure thing. This, like no, can literally, slowly or very quickly, kill your idea. And so the two practices really to look at, no and failure, I will tell you I see the biggest crashes, stalls, and epic quits over ideas. So I'm going to give you two things in this class to disempower any limiting views that you're holding in those top 7. So the first one is you can consciously shift your view from the limiting one to a positive one and then choose actions off that positive view. So I always tell the story. I was doing a negotiation with some facilities personnel. They were trying to get this huge change initiative through, and the operator told me, you know what, my boss is a complete idiot. There is not one intelligent thing the man says. I can't even stand to be around him. I get him out of my office as fast as possible. And I said, so your view basically is your boss is an idiot. And he goes, in spades. And so I just said, look, shift. I'm going to give you a thing called shifting your view. I said, just for 1 week, I want you to take on the view that your boss has something important to tell you and you need to listen to everything he says. And I said, I'm only asking for 7 days. I was going to see him in a class 7 days later. And I said, just report back to me day 7 when I see you in class again, how that worked for you. And he came back to class that day. And so, of course, first thing I did was have him stand up and share with the class. And I said, so how did it go? And he looked at me and, sometimes my facilities operators have colorful language. So there was a few expletives that came out first. And he goes, had the best week ever with my boss. And he did have stuff to tell me, and I heard it. And we had a huge breakthrough, and I'm already feeling better. So that's number 1. Number 2 is what I talked about earlier, the power of commitment. Your second option to shift the limiting view is to write a commitment that you'll stick to no matter how you feel or what the view tells you. So I had someone who kept quitting on their idea. Like they would start the idea and they were just like, I can't do it anymore. I can't do it anymore. And I said, what if you just make a commitment that for the rest of your life, you're going to make action on this idea, whether it fails or not? And they looked and they're like, I can do that? And I said, yeah, it's just a commitment. It just means if it fails, you keep going. And you say, no matter how I feel about it, I still take action. I still move it forward. So you can literally do that. It's like what I did with my son. I was like, I didn't know how I was going to run faster than my son at 140 pounds. I was pushing 300 pounds total with all this weird stuff. But I kept the commitment, and what it meant was for the next 5 years, I made huge changes in my life to support hitting that I could run faster than my son. And I will tell you, I did have success. I could run faster with my son. Can't anymore. He's 12. He can totally smoke me, but in the critical years, I could run faster than that boy. So where this leaves us is homework. So what I want you to do is grab a pen and a notebook. These 7 views I gave you, I want you to think of your idea, and then I want to think about your views that come up for you around that idea, okay? So that you can see what perceptions you have that may stop you around your idea. Pull those views out of your blind spots and up where you're conscious of them. And I gave you 7 intentionally because we're back together in 7 days. So if you do 1 when you get off the phone with me tonight and 1 each day, you'll actually have looked at all 7 views around your ideas. Number 2, you guys sent me amazing idea lists. I want 1. And I want you to email me 1 idea to m2m@thrivalcompany.com by Thursday, this Thursday, 12/18. Should not take you more than 2 days to pick an idea. I don't care if the idea is I just want to go on a date night once a week, or I had some of you who want to launch huge businesses, but I want that idea. And then third, I want 15 minutes on the phone with you about that idea. It will make all your time worth it on this course to make that investment. Invest in yourself. It's golden. All right. And don't forget, whatever you do every day, take an action. I told you I'm happy if you just do 5 minutes. So from a time check, we're at 7:55. Our next class, next week, like I said, this is all bonus content. This is actually not going to be in the book you're reading. This is going to be based on the next 2 books that I'm drafting for the publisher right now on practices that you can adopt. So I told you what your views are, and I gave you a couple tools. I'm going to give you practices that you can literally every day pick one and play with it to use the rest of your life to make sure the baggage doesn't come back and bite you in the butt. So, any questions before we close for the evening? You can type them in your chat box, or you can raise your hands, and I will go here and see what we have. I don't see anyone rapidly typing, so the class is actually on the 22nd. There is not a class on the 23rd next week. I thought that was too close to Christmas, and so I did make it on Monday, the 22nd. And the email address is m2m@thrivalcompany.com. And then a quick review of the 7 views that I asked you to consider tonight were the ones that we went over. And so if you actually go to practice 4 in your book, and so there's a table of contents in the book, you can go to practice 4, and all 7 views that I just discussed tonight are listed in that chapter, so you can review them. So all of you should have the book. If you don't have the book, you can email Deanna at m2m@thrivalcompany.com. You should have received a link in an email from us that allowed you to download that book. And so go to practice 4. All 7 views are there. Any other questions? Looks like I think I got them all. Class is on the 22nd, not the 23rd. Gave you the email address. 7 views are found in practice 4 of your book. And thank you, Deanna, for typing that in the chat box. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for giving me an hour of your life. I so appreciate it. I'm so excited to continue this journey with you, and I will see you in 6 days and counting on Monday, the 22nd at 7 p.m. Have a great evening, everybody.